It's interesting, most people kind of think that the life that they have is the life that they were always going to lead and that they're actually architects of their own destiny. So I want you to consider something for a moment. What if he had lived? What would your life look like then? What if he had died? How might that change things? What if he had lived and he had died? What if the painter of that painting had been accepted into art school? We wouldn't remember him in quite the same way. We wouldn't have seen that, and we might not remember him at all. What if the wind had been blowing in a slightly different direction as that armada approached that coast? Britain would now be part of Spain. On the plus side, our fans would look like that, our strike force would look like that, we'd currently be the holders of that and that. So it swings and roundabouts, isn't it? Here's a thought. The sperm that fertilised your mother's egg was actually the winning sperm of 300 million. What that means is that if your parents, or your parents' parents, or your parents' parents' parents, or their parents, could happen, had met or mated just 1 second earlier or later, let alone a week, you and the lives of every single person that you have ever come into contact with would be completely and unrecognisably different. There are things that you cannot control that have a material impact over everything that we take for granted in our lives. Things like the way that you look when you're born, the weather, whether you win the lottery. Some people will win the lottery. In fact, some people, like Maureen Wilcox, who won the New Jersey State Lottery in September 1985, will win it again. Isn't that incredible? Some people, oh yes, some people will get lucky. But the way that we use that word luck, particularly the way that we use it to account for our successes and failures with respect to other people, says a lot about who we are. And in fact, I would argue that it says a lot about the kind of successes and failures that we're going to experience. Whenever we use that word luck, we must always remember the words of Gary Player, who said memorably, "The more I practice, the luckier I get." It's a nice quotation, isn't it? But when we quote it, we also need to remember the context. Because when he said this, he was being sarcastic. He was saying that if you practice bunker shots for 3 hours a day, every day, like I do, you get better at them. And sometimes the ball will bounce the wrong way, and sometimes it'll have literally the rub of the green, and that to you will look like luck, but it's not. It's me doing everything I can to control the otherwise uncontrollable. This, some of you may remember, is the first habit of the 7 habits of highly effective people, according to Stephen Covey in his 15 million bestseller of that name. Ineffective people spend their time in their circle of concern, complaining about the weather, moaning about their boss's moods, while effective people are asking themselves, what can I do about that? And if the answer is nothing, how am I going to react to that fact? Covey correctly attributes this to a thinker who came before him, a man by the name of Viktor Frankl, a Jewish psychologist who was working in Germany in the 30s, who had the profound misfortune to be Jewish. As such, he was interned in a concentration camp, but he turned that into a positive experience. In fact, the book that he wrote when he was in there, A Man's Search for Meaning, is widely regarded as one of the most important books of the 20th century. In it, he recounts the fact that about 1 in 15 people who underwent this horrific, unimaginable experience actually did something quite extraordinary. They made a decision that it didn't matter what the Nazis did to them as people, it was down to them how they chose to think and feel as a result. Sentiments echoed by a Buddhist priest who was in Tibet when it was invaded by the Chinese and was asked, what was the most difficult period of your internment? And he replied, I think the most difficult period when I almost couldn't forgive them. In actual fact, the definition of responsibility, says Stephen Covey, is our response ability. It is our ability to respond to the things over which we have no control that define us as effective people. So my speech, Lucky in Business, is an exploration of these concepts, of that which we can't control and that which we can, and the way that we use luck to define the difference. It starts off by illustrating the 4 myths that have been created around this subject called luck, and identifies that if we use that word luck in a certain way, we're actually disempowering ourselves to deal with the vicissitudes of fortune. It goes on to outline the 4 habits of apparently lucky people. And I say apparently because nothing that we think and feel and do can actually make us luckier. It's not going to make you more likely to win the lottery. It's not going to make it more likely that there'll be sunshine on the day that you want it. We'll never make ourselves more lucky, but we can make ourselves more successful and effective. Lucky in Business is probably my most emotional and rousing speech. It was created to motivate and lift a group of people who feel sorry for themselves. And I know what that's like. I do it as much as anyone. But you know what? It doesn't matter how bad things get, and it doesn't really matter what this thing called luck is. We here in the Western world, we've had more than our fair share.